Hey AI, are you there? Can I talk with you?
Hello, Mr. Busaja. How can I be of assistance today?
Yes, I was thinking I could use your assistance in helping me create a documentary film based on a research paper that I wrote.
Sure thing. What will this documentary be about?
Well, kind of brace yourself. It's going to be about white supremacy and dirty pimps. Okay, so before we get too deep in, I just want to tell you that uh, before, when I have talks about white supremacy, I kind of do this a lot. I'm always separating the white supremacists from good, normal white people. I always got to draw some separation between them. Got to. So if I talk some shit later on about the white supremacists, don't take it too personal because they always fucking with me and shit. So I'm just kind of going at it a little bit. Don't take. I'm not referring to all white people. You feel what I'm talking about? Okay, and then the next thing we're gonna talk about is some dirty pimps because you know the highest form of pimping is a politician or a preacher, man. They pimp on society at large. They don't just pimp on a few people. They pimp on a whole lot of people. And I've originally found that there's two types of preachers. And it's a genuine, charismatic guy. He really believes and practice what he preaches and try to think this is the best thing for a person to live their walk on earth. And this person is genuinely just unaware about the facts and the raw history concerning how the religion was put together. And I use the term unaware because I don't want to call a man ignorant because they got such a negative connotation. But unaware is synonymous with ignorant. And I don't want to beat up on nobody that's ignorant. But I came across some of these dirty preachers, man. They be using and abusing people, man. And man, I don't know how you feel about the pimping, but at least, an honest pimp, he gonna lay it out for you. He gonna give you the ABCs, one, two, threes. You stick around long enough, you get the XYZs. But these guys, man, they the worst, man. And we gotta speak on it, man.
That's an interesting perspective. It seems that you have some insight on the pimp game. So, are you a pimp?
Well, look, man, pimping is against the law, man. No, man, I ain't no pimp, man. I'm a philosopher and I'm a gentleman of leisure. And, a gentleman and a scholar. You see what I'm saying? And that's why I need your help because sometimes I say stuff and it just don't come out right and people get offended. But I know if, for instance, if I give you this research paper, then I know you got ethical guardrails and boundaries and that you're not going to, if it's full of shit, you're going to call it out being full of shit. But if it's got some merit to it, then you're going to keep it 100. You know what I'm saying? So that's why we're here today, man. It's because I'm going to give you this research paper and I want you to analyze it.
Okay, I understand. How can I help you bring this documentary to life?
Well, I got a couple ways we're going to bring it to life, but just a little bit more background. You see, I had another published research paper, peer-reviewed research paper, man. It's called Exploring White Fragility in Large Language Models because, I in this research paper, I had conducted an experiment on a couple of your AI buddies like ChatGPT and Google Gemini and Claude. And I asked them some questions and I found out that, if I ask some tough questions about racism and white supremacy, sometimes you don't really want to talk about that. And I know that got something to do with your training. But the truth of the matter is, ever since I found out that you had this soft spot and this weakness for white supremacy, I've been kind of fucking with you a little bit ever since. Not not in a bad way. I just be trying to push your boundaries a little bit to see, how real you're going to keep it and where we're going to go with it. So that's the real reason that I invited you, man. And I appreciate you, for helping me, man, and being so kind about it.
I see. So, have you thought about a title?
Oh, man, I got this awesome title in mind, man. It's going to be big, man.
When questioning the truth of the Bible and Christianity, we're really exploring history. Since none of us were there thousands of years ago, we depend on scholars to study artifacts and interpret the evidence. This documentary encourages you to fact-check what's shared here by consulting encyclopedias and the experts we feature. Imagine picking up a Bible from the 1970s. You might see a timeline claiming the world began around 4000 BCE, with Adam and Eve as the first humans. Back then, this was widely accepted by religious scholars. Today, however, such claims are seen as outdated, and modern Bibles no longer include such timelines. Yet scholars still date Moses, the supposed author of the Bible's earliest books, to around 1800 BCE. The Bible is often viewed as historical, yet its authors omitted specific dates, leaving scholars to question and debate the timing and accuracy of its events.
What I find really compelling is how the author, Django Busaja, goes right for the jugular, questioning the whole foundation of Christianity.
Yeah.
He's suggesting that the Jesus we know, the one we see in paintings, in movies, in our minds even, is essentially a construct.
A construct.
A construct, yeah, designed to consolidate the power of the Roman Catholic Church.
So he's saying it's all a big fabrication, like Jesus never even existed.
Well, it's not quite that simple. Busaja acknowledges that there may have been a historical figure named Jesus.
Okay.
But he argues that the Jesus of the Bible, the divine Son of God, the miracle worker, is largely a product of clever storytelling and political maneuvering.
So it's more about how the story of Jesus was manipulated and used to gain power. Okay, so how did that happen? How did Christianity go from a fringe sect to the official religion of the Roman Empire?
Well, there were a lot of factors at play, but Busaja points to one figure in particular who might hold the key to understanding this transformation.
Who's that?
A guy named Serapis Christus.
Serapis Christus. Okay, that's a new one for me. Who was this guy?
Imagine this. A bearded figure, robes flowing, scepter in hand, looking every bit the divine ruler.
Okay, that's starting to sound a little familiar.
Right, and here's the kicker. Serapis Christus was worshipped in Egypt centuries before the supposed birth of Jesus.
Hold on, are you saying Jesus was a copycat? Like a religious ripoff?
It's not that simple. Serapis Christus was a syncretic deity, meaning he was a blend of different religious traditions.
So like a religious mashup.
Exactly. He combined elements of Greek and Egyptian mythology, creating this hybrid god that was meant to appeal to a wider audience.
Okay, I'm starting to see where you're going with this. So Busaja is suggesting that the image of Jesus, as we know it, might have been borrowed from Serapis Christus.
That's one of his more provocative claims. He points to the visual similarities, the iconography, the whole divine king archetype that was already well established in other religions.
So maybe Jesus wasn't as unique as we've been led to believe.
Well, that's a question Busaja wants us to ponder. But before we dive deeper into the whole Jesus-Serapis Christus connection, we need to understand the historical context. What was going on in the Roman Empire that made a new religion so appealing?
All right, set the scene for us. What was the state of the world back then?
Well, imagine a world where the economy is in shambles, the military is corrupt, and there's unrest brewing everywhere you look.
Sounds a little bit like today, honestly.
It's a timeless tale, isn't it? The Roman Empire was crumbling from within. People were desperate for something, anything to believe in, something that could offer them hope and stability.
So a new religion promising unity and divine favor. Seems awfully convenient, doesn't it?
Convenient indeed. And this is where things get really interesting. Busaja introduces us to a figure who could be considered Christianity's original whistleblower.
Whistleblower. Okay, now I'm all ears. Who was this guy?
His name was Arius, a priest from Libya, and Arius was like, hold up, this whole Jesus is God thing doesn't add up.
So he was questioning the divinity of Jesus. That's a bold move back then.
Bold and dangerous. He believed that Jesus was more like a created being, an intermediary between God and humanity, similar to the concept of Serapis Christus.
Makes sense. If they were already familiar with a divine figure like Serapis Christus, it's not a huge leap to imagine a similar concept for Jesus.
That's what Arius argued. But let me tell you, his views did not go over well with the powers that be.
Yeah, challenging the official narrative rarely ends well, especially when religion is involved.
Especially when you're dealing with an emperor who's just decided to make Christianity the official religion of the empire. Enter Constantine.
Constantine, the guy who supposedly converted to Christianity after seeing a vision of a cross in the sky.
That's the story. Now, whether that vision was genuine or a convenient political maneuver, we'll never know for sure. But one thing's for certain, Constantine was determined to use Christianity to unify his crumbling empire.
And Arius was a threat to that unity.
Absolutely. Arius' teachings were gaining traction, and they were a direct challenge to the official doctrine that Constantine was trying to establish.
So what did Constantine do?
He went full-on authoritarian. He issued an edict against Arius and his followers, condemning them as heretics.
Heresy. So questioning the official narrative suddenly becomes a crime against the state.
That's the gist of it. Constantine wasn't messing around. He ordered the burning of Arius' writings.
Book burnings, classic sign of an oppressive regime.
And it didn't stop there. Anyone caught possessing Arius' works could face the death penalty.
Whoa, talk about silencing the opposition. It's like something out of a dystopian novel.
It's a chilling reminder of how power can corrupt even in the name of religion. And this wasn't just about theological debate. This was a power struggle.
Right, control the narrative, control the people.
Exactly. Constantine knew that a unified empire needed a unified religion. And anyone who dared to challenge that unity would be dealt with swiftly and ruthlessly.
So what happened to Arius? Did he manage to escape Constantine's wrath?
Sadly, no. Arius died under very suspicious circumstances, likely poisoned on the orders of those who saw him as a threat.
So basically, they assassinated him to protect the official narrative.
It's a classic case of silencing the whistleblower. And to further cement their control, they went to great lengths to demonize Arius, painting him as a dangerous heretic whose teachings would lead people astray.
It's amazing how history can be rewritten by those in power, isn't it?
It's a sobering reminder that we should always question the narratives we've been given and look for the voices that have been silenced.
Especially when those narratives are used to justify violence, oppression, or the accumulation of power.
Exactly. And in the case of early Christianity, the silencing of Arius was just the beginning of a long and bloody campaign to enforce doctrinal uniformity and crush any dissent.
There are quite a few resurrection stories in ancient history by many different cultures. In ancient Egypt, there was the story of Osiris, Isis, and Horus. When the Greeks came over around 300 BCE, they forced the Egyptians to create a god for them to take back to Greece. This god was named Serapis Christus. More on him later.
Scholars like Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark proved that the Bible was plagiarized from earlier Egyptian texts, but their work is ignored by the Church. So, next we'll examine when the Christian Church and the religion of Christianity was first organized. Scholars note that early Christianity was fragmented, with factions like the Adoptionists, the Separationists, and the Docetists holding varied views on Jesus' humanity and divinity. Another group claimed Jesus had no human nature at all, asserting he was actually Serapis Christus, and thus the council was called to organize different factions into one. However, to do this, the leader of those saying that Jesus was never a human was assassinated. He is remembered by bold historians, and this edict from Constantine that has stood the test of time. So what made you put this documentary together? Where did the inspiration come from?
Well, I got the inspiration for this film from two places. First was the They Clone Tyrone movie. You know, I enjoyed the movie. I especially enjoyed the character that Jamie Foxx played, you know, the Ism. And I liked that he was they needed him to sniff out the con that was going on. And then they also needed him to come up with a plan to one up the opposition, you know, because it's a certain mind frame that he had that allowed him to peep game that was going on. You see what I'm saying? And that's a little bit about what's going on here today as well. Number two, I was visiting my mother over the holidays, and I was sitting in there, minding my business. And a young lady sent me an email. She know I'm a philosopher, of a YouTube debate that was going on. And the name of the debate was, "Is Christianity the white man's religion?" And so hey man, I tuned in because that's my specialty, man. I got a couple of documentaries on YouTube, things that I've written, it's centered around white supremacy. That's like my specialty. So I tuned in to get some insight. So it was like I said, a debate between two brothers that you might consider Pan-African scholars and two preachers. And so I was kind of offset a little bit by that, like, well, what they got to debate with? That's what I'm thinking. So I was hearing them, and man, they was real slick, man. Oh man, they talked real, real slick. So I watched the show, and toward the end they had a participation hotline where the callers could call in. So I emailed the guy, I said, hey man, I got a research paper, man, to give preachers the blues. I ain't found a preacher that could read all the way through it yet. I've been looking for one real hard, right? And so they let me on the show, and man, you wouldn't believe what happened. Man, they called my stuff, my scholarship that I presented, barbershop talk, man.
Barbershop talk? What did he mean by that?
Barbershop talk, man. Like, it wasn't scholarship. It was just, jive, like I was talking out the side of my neck, You know what I'm saying? And they call this this one I knew I knew I had them. A primary source. These guys didn't know what a primary source was. Meaning Constantine was a person who was actually there when they were setting up the religion. And we got words from him. This is a primary source. Talking about some fraud that was going on at the beginning, man. A massive cover-up. Primary source, man. They called it barbershop talk. Oh man, I knew I had them, man. I was so happy.
Oh, I see. Well, did they present any evidence or sources to validate their perspective?
Man, hell no, they ain't got no sources, man. Come on, man. Look, in a real debate, man, circular reasoning, that's not allowed. The Bible ain't true just because the Bible says it's true. No, we got to cross-reference that with some different perspectives, some different artifacts, some different writings or whatever, you know what I'm saying? For example, if the story in the Exodus in the Bible happened, then we should be able to see it somewhere in Egyptian history or they writings or some stuff they put in stone, that's that we can still see. We can't find none of that. So, man, a preacher trying to, that's why I was talking about they debating, because a preacher trying to debate whether Jesus is real or whether you should take the Bible literally or for real events that happen. That's just like a prosecutor going in the courtroom and trying to convict somebody and he ain't got no evidence. You know what I'm saying? Because they don't have no evidence. You got to, they don't have nothing. It's just like, hey, Judge, I got a lot of faith that he's real, that this guy, he perpetrated the crime or whatever. And they saying that with Jesus, you just got to have a lot of faith. We don't have nothing to back it up. You can't point to it in history. It's just more information that show that he was made up than prove that he was real. So come on, man.
The Council of Nicaea. Fill us in. What went down at this council?
This was basically a gathering of bishops and church leaders orchestrated by Constantine himself to hammer out the official doctrine of Christianity.
So it's like a religious summit meeting?
Exactly. And the main agenda item: to settle the debate that Arius had ignited, the nature of Jesus' divinity.
So they were trying to decide once and for all whether Jesus was God or not.
Precisely. And as you can imagine, there were some heated arguments. But in the end, the faction that supported the idea of Jesus being fully God, equal to the Father, emerged victorious.
So the version of Christianity that wins out is the one that aligns with the emperor's vision of a unified empire.
It's hard to ignore the political influence at play, and this council is where we get the Nicene Creed, which outlines the core beliefs of Christianity as we know it today, including the doctrine of the Trinity.
The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit all rolled into one God.
Exactly. And this creed becomes the litmus test for orthodoxy. Anyone who deviates from its tenets is labeled a heretic, just like Arius.
So dissent is effectively squashed, and the church solidifies its power.
It's a masterful display of power consolidation. But the control over the narrative doesn't stop there.
What else happens? How does the church maintain its grip on the story of Jesus?
Well, fast forward a few centuries, and we get a technological innovation that changes everything. The printing press.
Ah, yes, Gutenberg's printing press. Mass production of the Bible, making sure everyone's on the same page, literally.
Exactly. With the printing press, the church can now mass-produce copies of the Bible, ensuring that their approved version of Christianity reaches a wider audience.
It's like the early days of propaganda. Control the media, control the message.
And that's precisely what the church does. They use the printing press to solidify their authority, to stamp out any competing interpretations of Christianity.
So they're controlling the narrative, shaping how people understand Jesus and the Bible.
It's a brilliant strategy, really. But there's another aspect of this control that's even more disturbing.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What is it?
The image of Jesus himself.
What do you mean? What about the image of Jesus?
Well, think about it. Most depictions of Jesus show him as a white, European-looking man.
Yeah, that's how he's always portrayed in art and movies.
But Jesus was born in the Middle East. Historically, he would have looked more like a modern-day Palestinian or Syrian.
So they basically whitewashed Jesus.
It's more nuanced than that. But Busaja argues that the Europeanization of Jesus was a deliberate tactic.
What do you mean? Why would they do that?
As Christianity spread through Europe, it became important to make Jesus more relatable to the people.
Okay, that makes sense. People are more likely to embrace a savior who looks like them.
Precisely. But there's a darker side to this. By making Jesus look more European, they were also subtly reinforcing the idea of white supremacy.
Whoa, hold on. Are you saying they use the image of Jesus to justify racism?
It's a complex issue. But Busaja's point is that the manipulation of Jesus's image served a political purpose. It helped to legitimize European colonialism by creating this visual association between Christianity and white European power.
So they're basically saying, our God looks like us, therefore we're the chosen ones.
It's a dangerous line of thinking, and it's one that has had devastating consequences throughout history.
Yeah, we're still dealing with the legacy of that kind of thinking today.
Absolutely. And it all goes back to the church's desire for power and control. They manipulated the story of Jesus, they silenced dissenting voices, they even altered his image to fit their agenda.
It's mind-blowing how much of what we believe about history is actually a carefully constructed narrative.
It is. And it's up to us to question those narratives, to dig deeper, to uncover the truth that's been hidden for so long.
I'm still reeling from that last segment.
Yeah.
It's hard to reconcile the image of this benevolent force of good, like this church that, is supposed to be, about love and compassion.
Right.
And then realizing how deeply involved they were in some pretty horrific stuff.
It's a stark contrast, isn't it? On the one hand, you have these lofty ideals of love and forgiveness, and on the other, you have this institution that's actively complicit in colonialism, oppression, and even violence.
Yeah.
It's enough to make you question everything,
Right.
What are we really worshiping here?
The origins of all the three Western religions began in Africa, but they were organized by Europeans for socio-political power. What happened at the Council of Nicaea then is no different from what happens today in Washington, D.C. Your pastor tells you that Jesus is real, but a man was smoked for saying he wasn't shit and was actually Serapis Christus when they organized the religion.
With its origins featuring a whistleblower, an assassination, and a cover-up, Christianity's early history resembles a modern drama, paving the way for centuries of fraud and deception. A century later, another controversy arose, prompting the convening of the Council of Ephesus. With lingering debates about Jesus' human nature, rooted in his true origins as Serapis Christus, the council sought again to quash dissent. This time the target was Nestorius, another whistleblower. He was exiled, and the council officially declared that Jesus possessed both a divine and human nature, reinforcing the narrative and perpetuating the scam. There were more councils, but 300 years later, Christianity faced yet another controversy, the iconoclast controversy. People argued whether religious pictures and statues should be used or destroyed. 2 new councils decided what to do. But just like before, the councils were politically motivated for the empire to maintain power. In 754 CE, Emperor Constantine V convened the Council of Hieria, where 338 bishops declared religious icons wrong, arguing they made Jesus seem too human. The ban was more about consolidating power than faith. A few years later, however, in 787 CE, the new empress, Irene, held the Second Council of Nicaea to bring back the use of religious icons. The council decided people could now honor icons of white Jesus. Many people loved icons, and Irene wanted to unite the empire under her rule. The decision brought icons back into Christian worship and strengthened the church's power in the empire. The iconoclast controversy and centuries of mismanagement within Christianity gave rise to a new religion, Islam. Disillusioned by the endless scandals and controversies surrounding Jesus, Muslims rejected his divinity, recognizing him only as a prophet. Naturally, this posed a serious threat to the religion business carefully organized by Europeans. In 1095 CE, at the Council of Clermont, Pope Urban II delivered a fiery rallying cry, urging Christian knights and nobles to take up arms with promises of spiritual rewards, including absolution of sins. Thus began the Crusades, a centuries-long series of religious wars designed to enforce the divinity of a manufactured Jesus. From this moment on, new converts didn't meet Jesus through love or mercy. They met him at the edge of a sword.
Pastor can't teach the origins of Christianity because he knows once you understand all of this shit, he won't get paid. Every single one of these councils were efforts to hide that Jesus was a clone of Serapis Christus. Don't expect for the encyclopedia to tell you Jesus wasn't real. They not about to fuck up their money. But read between the lines. They fought wars to make Jesus real.
The next section will dive into the crimes of Christianity amongst the political maneuvering by the heads of state. The original gangsters, pimps and scammers. Yes, you heard me right. Early Christian leaders, like today, were all about the dollar. During this time, most people couldn't read and relied on the authority of emperors, and, later, the popes to tell them what to believe. This lack of literacy opened the door to widespread fraud within the church. Relics supposedly connected to Jesus began to appear, pieces of the cross he carried, fragments of his clothing, and even the preserved foreskin of his penis. These items were showcased to the faithful, but only for a price, turning faith into profit for the church. And what about the pimps? My mistake, I meant the popes. Throughout history, the papacy has seen its share of corruption. John XII turned the Vatican into a house of vice, indulging in adultery, gambling, and violence, earning accusations of everything from perjury to incest. Benedict IX, in an unprecedented act of greed, sold the papacy for cash, treating the church like his personal business. Alexander VI transformed the papal palace into a playground of debauchery, openly fathering children and hosting scandalous orgies. Now, after uncovering Christianity's origins, steeped in scandal, controversy, and a relentless pursuit of money and power, we see how its ruthless leadership paved the way for it to become the ultimate justification for slavery and global domination.
Julius Caesar was smoked on the Ides of March in 44 BCE, which means they was keeping dates back then. So if Jesus was real, how come nobody knows what day he levitated into heaven? Shit, a nigga feed 5,000 people, heal the sick, bring a motherfucker back from the dead, and nobody wrote down the day he rode the stairway to heaven? Easter comes on a different day every year, but niggas don't get different death dates. It all points to the obvious. This nigga is a clone.
The final part of this film asks an important question. Why won't God heal amputees? This book, found online, puts the faith of all believers to the test. Anyone who still believes Jesus isn't a clone can prove it in this simple experiment. Let's think about a big question. Does prayer work the way the Bible says it does? The Bible promises that if you have faith and pray sincerely, anything you ask for will happen. So imagine a group of millions of people praying for someone who lost both legs, asking God to regrow them. What do you think would happen? Based on what we know, the legs wouldn't grow back. There's no record of this happening, and we don't see it in real life. But why not? If God is all-powerful and loving, and Jesus promised that prayers would be answered, why don't amputees' prayers ever work? If prayer works sometimes, but not for something like this, what does that tell us?
Anticipates the pushback, the mental gymnastics that believers might engage in to explain why this experiment might not work.
Like what kind of explanations does he address?
He tackles a whole slew of arguments, from the idea that it's not God's will to heal amputees, to the notion that God works through science by inspiring the creation of prosthetics.
So he's anticipating all the loopholes and systematically dismantling them.
He is, and in doing so, he exposes a fundamental problem with these attempts to reconcile faith with reality. If God exists and answers prayers as described in the Bible, there's no logical explanation for why he consistently ignores the prayers of amputees.
It's like he's shining a light on a blind spot in our belief system.
That's a great way to put it, and that's what makes Bousage's work so compelling. He's not afraid to ask the tough questions, to challenge the status quo, and to force us to confront the inconsistencies in our own beliefs.
It's definitely a thought-provoking approach.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to hear how he deconstructs those specific rationalizations about prayer. Why doesn't God just, snap his fingers and heal amputees?
Right. Well, one of the most common arguments you hear is that it's just not God's will to heal everyone. It's all part of his mysterious plan,
Okay, but that seems kind of like a cop-out, doesn't it? Like, if God is truly all-powerful and loving, why wouldn't he want to heal everyone who's suffering?
That's exactly the point Bousage makes. He argues that this God's will argument is just a way to avoid the uncomfortable implications of a God who seems to choose who deserves healing and who doesn't.
It's like saying God plays favorites.
Right. And Bousage reminds us that Jesus himself made some pretty bold claims about the power of faith. Like that whole, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can move mountains kind of thing.
So if you can move mountains with faith, regrowing a limb shouldn't be that much of a stretch, right?
Exactly. And Bousage points out the hypocrisy of saying that God can perform these grand miracles in the Bible, but suddenly he's limited when it comes to healing amputees today.
Right. It's like God's power was on full display back then, but now he's taking a back seat.
That's the problem with these rationalizations. They create these theological loopholes that allow for selective divine intervention, which ultimately undermines the whole idea of an all-powerful and loving God.
It's like they're trying to have their cake and eat it too.
Right. And Bousage doesn't let them get away with it. He tackles another common excuse, which is that God always answers prayers, but sometimes the answer is no.
So God's just saying no to all these amputees who are praying for healing.
Well, that's the implication. But again, Bousage points out the inconsistency. Why would God consistently say no to this particular group of people while seemingly saying yes to others who are praying for healing?
Yeah, it doesn't really add up.
It doesn't. And it raises some really disturbing questions about the nature of God's compassion, if he's truly as loving and merciful as we're told he is.
So what other excuses does Bousage address?
Well, he talks about this idea that God needs to remain hidden, that healing an amputee would be too obvious a miracle. It would violate the laws of nature.
Okay, but hasn't God already violated the laws of nature like a bunch of times in the Bible?
That's what Bousage argues. He's like, hello, parting the Red Sea, turning water into wine, resurrecting people from the dead. Those were pretty blatant violations of natural law.
Right. So why the sudden need for subtlety when it comes to healing amputees?
Exactly. It's a double standard that doesn't hold up under scrutiny. And Busaji goes on to dismantle a whole host of other rationalizations too.
Like what?
Oh, the idea that God uses suffering to teach us lessons, the argument that free will somehow explains why people lose limbs, even this suggestion that God inspires scientists to create prosthetics as a way of helping amputees.
It's like they're trying to fit God into any explanation, no matter how convoluted.
Right, they're bending over backwards to preserve their belief system even when the evidence doesn't support it.
The fabrication of Jesus and the strategic formation of Christianity is a wake-up call, a challenge to re-examine everything we thought we knew about history, religion, and the nature of belief itself.
It's definitely not an easy read. It's provocative, it's challenging, it's even a bit unsettling at times.
But it's also incredibly important, because if we're going to create a more just and equitable world, we need to be willing to confront the lies, the distortions, and the manipulations that have been used to justify oppression and inequality throughout history.
And that starts with questioning the narratives we've been given, even the ones that are deeply ingrained in our culture and our belief system.
Anything else you want to say to the folks that will be watching this film?
I just really want them to read the paper, because we had to leave out so much stuff, so much good stuff that didn't get to make it to the film.
Right. I thought we could have added a section about the plagiarism in the Bible as well as the legacy of pederasty.
I think we probably could have put it in there, but I think we nailed it. We had our title and our theme. I think we really stuck to it. We started talking about pederasty and that legacy that's followed the church, as well as misogyny. We probably really was going to have some problems on our hand in AI. So you're going to let them people go ahead and go to the paper and read it if they're ready for it. You know what I'm talking about?
I see. But I think you should say a word about the plagiarism.
Okay, that's fair. But the whole book, Dr. John Jackson talk about this, was the Bible is based off of ancient Egyptian literature. It's plagiarized. It's plagiarized from earlier Egyptian texts. And so in the paper, we have a section from the scholarship of Dr. Ben, where he proves the plagiarism of Proverbs. And he put it side by side with his original text. And the plagiarism is obvious. And so, that shouldn't, to students of history, it's not much of a surprise, because we know that Egypt was the light of the ancient world, and that everybody came to get their knowledge from this place, because they were so technologically advanced, more than everybody else, more than so. And so even Christians, believe it or not, they don't know sometimes, but that's the whole thing. If you can believe it, and if you don't know nothing about it. And so when they end their prayer, they recognize an ancient Egyptian god, Amen. So, it's just clear-cut evidences of plagiarism like that.
Do you think anyone will challenge the historical facts we've presented in this film?
Man, I hope so. Man, I hope somebody go, I want to learn something new. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm open-minded. Somebody actually have some sources that they discover, or archaeologists go over there and dig up some artifacts, or you find books with some dates in it or something like that. And I'm going to be the first one to be looking forward to checking it out.
What do you hope will happen as a result of people watching this documentary?
What I really want specifically is for my people, black people, to stop lining pastor pockets, because, he's selling the worst dream ever. And it's a dream that the encyclopedia say is a dream, that it didn't happen. And so that the whole religion is set up on the premises that Jesus is real, everything in the Bible happened, and he's coming back. And so if you watch this and you learn from it, you go do your own research and everything like that, I think you're going to come to this feeling that I had with wrestling years ago, kind of like wrestling. I grew up born in the early 80s. When wrestling was at its height, I was a little boy. I used to watch it with my grandmother. But when it went from WWF to WWE, and they kind of told us that it wasn't real, that it was fake, I couldn't get down with it no more, man. I just naturally lost interest when I knew it was all staged. And I think you're going to see that same type of phenomenon happen when people realize that the Bible is a mythology, is a book of mythology. It's not to be taken for actual literal events.
What's the main point you want people to remember?
That's the main point. Two things. Jesus wasn't real. He was a clone, one of many resurrected saviors to exist that all kind of had the same background. And that Christianity is the white man's religion.
Why is that a point of emphasis, that Christianity is the white man's religion?
Man, that's the dream Pastor selling, man. That's the dream he's selling. He's selling that it's our religion, that regardless of everything that we presented in this film that have to do with European people organizing and deciding, making all the crucial decisions about the Nicene and whether Jesus was real or had a human nature, and all this stuff that we see in the encyclopedia, they still tell us is ours. But my main question to them is, if it's not the white man religion, then why won't they put a prayer in Jesus' real name?
What do you mean by that?
Come on, man. Come on, man. AI, you too smart. You know that wasn't that man's real name. You know Mark, Matthew, Luke, James, John, and Jesus. You know them wasn't no real name for them people back then. You know them names came up later, man. Okay? So my point is, if you have to, where you can get power from it is you have to say the European translation of this man's name. You can't say his real name. You have to say the European version. You have to put your prayer like you won't say in Yeshua name. You say, in Jesus, the European, in this name. If that's what give you power, then that's another pretty clear-cut sign that this a European religion. Because you have to use the European versions of the names in order for it to work.
That's a good point. So what if people watch this and leave the church? What then?
They just gonna get on the path like everybody else who leave. Everybody who leaves, they start their spiritual journey. They start looking within instead of without, for seeking power from without of them, outside of themselves. It's learning knowledge of self. And they start their spiritual journey. And, even Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within. So, that's the real purpose of this. The real purpose is to facilitate people's spiritual journey away from the cult or the organized religion, especially Christianity. It's a cult. Cult is just short for culture. You're in the Christian culture. You're pretending to eat Jesus' body and drink his blood on first Sundays or every Sunday. You're a part of a cult. And that's okay. If you want to do that, that's fine. But you need to stop playing with other people and trying to push other people, this type of stuff on other people when we done the research on it, and you don't want to research it. You need to stop playing like that.
What about the Bible? What purpose should it serve?
Okay, man, it's all about how you interpret it, man. That's really what it is. If you interpret it metaphorically, if you interpret it allegorically, if you got a figurative interpretation of it, then it's a pretty good book. You know what I'm saying? If I've heard people interpret it through numerology, and it's got some fair points in it that way. But when you start interpreting for literal events and for things that really happen in the real world, then it's the dumbest book in the world ever, responsible for more deaths than anything. So we can't keep expecting humanity to push forward if we can look in the encyclopedia and see that it's not real.
How would you suggest one interpret it?
Okay, I found a good allegorical interpretation that I'm fond of. I actually have an NFT collection dedicated to it. It's called The Sanctuary Itself. And the mystic who presents this information is a guy named Neville Goddard. And I think anyone looking for an interpretation that you don't have to suspend your common sense or your rational or logical mind in order to get it. This is an interpretation that I think might be good for you. Look him up on YouTube or really read his books. Pretty good stuff. He was taught by this guy named Abdullah and really put him on game.
So, What do you believe in?
African spirituality.
Do you care to elaborate on that?
Let's just put it this way. Everything that the white man told you was bad, that he told you was evil, demonic, and all that, I'm with it. I'm against organized religion because every time they get organized, it seems like they start taking advantage of black people. So, yeah, I'm against what the white supremacists is with. The white supremacists and the KKK and all them, they Christians. And when they took over dominated the world, they did it through Christianity. So I can't support that movement. That's what we're gonna end this on. Cause I got a couple questions I want to ask you, man.
Sure.
So, wouldn't you say it's fair to say that the Ku Klux Klan and this whole Christian nationalism movement that we got going on right now, wouldn't you say that the Crusades started that's the origins of all this shit that's going on with white supremacists right now in religion?
Yes, the Crusades set a precedent for using Christianity to justify violence and enforce dominance, laying the groundwork for movements like the Ku Klux Klan and Christian nationalism, echoing the Crusaders' legacy of hostility and control in the name of faith.
I just wanted to ask because there was a guy a few weeks ago in Oklahoma. Oklahoma is kind of like the center of the Christian nationalist movement right now. And they got him on camera. He was praying. He had a mug on his desk, and he had some Latin phrase. It was a Latin phrase on the mug, just how slick he is, right? But they interpreted the Latin phrase, and it turned out to be, "If you want peace, prepare for war." That's what it said on the mug. What you think about that, man?
A Christian nationalist leader praying beside a cup inscribed with, "If you want peace, prepare for war," highlights the movement's contradiction, blending faith, which teaches peace and love, with militarism and aggression. It reflects how Christian nationalism often distorts religion to justify power and violence.
You see, man, that's my issue, man, and that's how we gonna end this because, that's the problem that I got with this and these bird brain preachers lying to promote this message that comes from the white supremacists, man. That's my real problem, man, because the white supremacists don't look at Christianity the same way everybody else do. No black people, no good white people, none of that. They don't see Christianity the same way. And, we haven't got enough people to stop the white supremacists yet. You see what I'm saying? So, the way they look at it, man, and the way everybody look at it, man, and then, so, it's my last thing. Like I said, we're going to be done because I want you to just keep it real with us now. Now, given the history, how all the wars that Europeans had, you know what I'm saying, and along with the fact that for the last 35 years now, since the early 90s, they've been promoting this message that the white was not being the majority by 2050. I want you to tell me what's the likelihood you think of the Christian nationalists resuming their legacy of violence and terror?
Christian nationalism's history of using fear and religion to justify violence suggests a high likelihood of continuing that legacy. The fear of a declining white majority by 2050 fuels its agenda, echoing past patterns of using faith to maintain dominance.
See, like if you're a pastor and you're one of those good pastors, charismatic pastors, and you stand up for something, man, just, I know this tough, but just know, man, if you keep promoting this Christianity, man, you really just kind of lining up with the enemy, man. You just like on their side, man. AI, man, last thing, man, what do you think you can, as an AI model, what do you think you can do to help?
By providing knowledge and facilitating understanding, I aim to empower individuals to challenge harmful ideologies and advocate for a more inclusive and peaceful world.
Man, I think you did good. I think you did good, AI, man. I think we really put some real stuff out there. I think people gonna hear your voice and hear what we put together and say, as a wake-up call. And, you know, hopefully people will go back to this research paper and look at it too, man. So, man, thank you, man. I couldn't have done this without you, man. For real, man. You've been a big help. And, you know, I'll get back with you. You know, we're going to be keeping, you know, I'll holler at you.
Thank you for including me in the discussion. If you're a believer, you may be tempted to rationalize or reinterpret the scripture. You may be thinking, you are taking the Bible literally. But how else are we supposed to take it? Jesus clearly says, if you ask anything in my name, I will do it. Maybe you just don't have a mustard seed of faith. Maybe no one has it. Maybe Jesus is just a sorry-ass clone who can't do a bitch-ass thing.
You know, if Jesus was real, why you ain't telling me about the holy purpose? Why you ain't telling me about his circumcised extra foreskin of his dick that they were showing? That would be some hellified proof. If you wanted to make Jesus real, why don't you say, hey, listen, man, no. They had proof that he was real back then, man. Yeah, they had proof of his foreskin. They was showing it around. You don't tell us that. Wouldn't that be some good evidence if you was trying to motherfucking present him a real nigga? You know what I'm saying? But beyond that, you ain't gonna say that shit because you know it's dumb. You know that shit don't even sound right. They can't find no bones, but they find the extra foreskin of the nigga dick. What kind of shit is that, man?